Two U.S. Air Force B-1B bombers were dispatched from Andersen Air Base on Guam and conducted a sequenced bilateral mission in the vicinity of the Korean peninsula alongside Japan Air Self-Defense Force fighters and Republic of Korea Air Force fighters, U.S. Air Force spokeswoman Captain Victoria Hight told Newsweek. After taking off from Andersen Air Base, the bombers transited south of Korea and west of Japan to integrate with the Japanese fighters. The Lancers then transited overland to Korea to integrate with Republic of Korea fighters in the Yellow Sea. Upon completion of bilateral integration, the aircraft returned to their respective home stations, Hight said. The mission was planned in advance and was not in response to any current event, Hight added. The U.S. routinely flies bombers near Korea in show-of-force missions against the North Korean regime. In September, U.S. bombers escorted by fighter jets flew along the North Korean coast, going further north of the demilitarized zone separating North and South Korea than any U.S. military plane has flown this century. In October, two U.S. B-1B bombers conducted air-to-ground missile drills off South Korean waters. Decades-old tensions between North Korea and the U.S. have skyrocketed this year as Pyongyang had ramped up its long-range missile tests in pursuit of a nuclear weapon capable of reaching the mainland U.S. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have engaged in a war of words, frequently trading insults and threats of mass destruction. Over the summer, Trump said North Korea would witness fire and fury like the world has never seen if it didn't stop threatening the U.S. in September. During his first address in front of the United Nations, Trump threatened to totally destroy North Korea if it forced the U.S. to defend itself and its allies. This was not long after North Korea conducted its sixth nuclear test. The Russian nation has since then threatened to conduct a seventh test over the Pacific Ocean, which would be a provocative and risky move.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. He has been very threatening beyond a normal statement. And as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before. Thank you.
Trump's bombastic rhetoric on North Korea has prompted criticism from those who feel he sounds too similar to North Korean leaders and has only exacerbated the situation. But National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster on Thursday defended the president's comments about Kim and his regime.
Tomorrow, President Trump embarks on his longest foreign trip to date and the longest trip to Asia by an American president in more than a quarter century. This trip is a great opportunity to demonstrate America's and the Trump administration's commitment to the Indo-Pacific and our efforts to strengthen long-standing American alliances and expand new partnerships. The President has actively engaged leaders in the Indo-Pacific this year to address a range of strategic issues, including, most notably, the North Korean nuclear threat. Since taking office, President Trump has placed 43 calls to Indo-Pacific leaders and conducted bilateral meetings with Japan, South Korea, China, India, Australia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand. This historic trip will build on that ongoing diplomacy. The President's trip will focus on three goals. First, strengthening international resolve to denuclearize North Korea. Second, promote a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Third, advance American prosperity through fair and reciprocal trade and economic practices. The United States remains committed to the complete, verifiable, and permanent denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. President Trump will reiterate the plain fact that North Korea threatens not just our allies South Korea and Japan and the United States. North Korea is a threat to the entire world, so all nations of the world must do more to counter that threat. That is happening, but the President recognizes that we're running out of time and will ask all nations to do more. In particular, the President will continue to call on all responsible nations, especially those with the most influence over North Korea, to isolate the North Korean regime economically and politically, to convince its leaders that the pursuit of nuclear weapons is a dead end and that it is past time to denuclearize. And he will remind friend and foe alike that the United States stands ready to defend itself and our allies using the full range of our capabilities. The President will also use his trip to promote his vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific region. The President will make the case that respect for freedom of navigation and overflight, the rule of law, sovereignty, freedom from coercion, and private enterprise and open markets is the best model to increase prosperity throughout the region and to secure the freedom and independence of all nations. And of course, increasing prosperity of the American people is always one of President Trump's top priorities. Throughout the trip, the President will stress his commitment to free, fair, and reciprocal trade. He looks forward to working with partners across the Indo-Pacific region to ensure that governments do not unfairly subsidize their industries, discriminate against foreign business, or restrict foreign investment. This will help increase trade, reduce unsustainable deficits, and promote prosperity for the American people and the people of the Indo-Pacific region. A final point, and a point that's often overlooked, this trip, like all the President's engagements with foreign leaders, builds on previous accomplishments and on previous diplomatic efforts. One example I'll provide is that in Riyadh in May, President Trump delivered a historic speech to the leaders of more than 50 Muslim-majority nations. The President will interact with many of those same leaders at APEC or ASEAN, both of those conferences. He will reiterate three key U.S. counterterrorism pillars that he unveiled in that speech in Riyadh. First, deny terrorists safe havens and support bases. Second, cut off their funding. And third, discredit their wicked ideology. I think it's time for us to recognize that there's been significant progress on all three fronts. Raqqa and Mosul have been liberated and will soon no longer control territory and populations, as the United States has worked very hard with allies and partners to deny that safe haven and support basis, in this case to ISIS. Second, we should recognize that there's been considerable progress on terrorist financing. As you saw Secretary Mnuchin's visit to the region last week, during which he opened the Terrorist Financing Targeting Center. And then also, you've heard a lot of leaders across the world, and the President foremost among them, discrediting this ideology, this Islamist or Takfirist or Salafi jihadist ideology. And last week, I think it's worth reading Saudi Crown Prince, the Saudi Crown Prince's speech, during which he called for a return to moderate Islam. At the ASEAN 50th birthday party in Manila, the President will discuss how to strengthen partnerships across the Indo-Pacific to further efforts against transnational terrorist organizations. So this trip is an opportunity to build momentum towards shared prosperity and security, and I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you. Okay, so the President will use whatever language he wants to use, obviously, and what the President has done is clarified in all of his discussions, his statements on North Korea, our determination to ensure that North Korea is unable to threaten our allies and our partners and certainly the United States. So he's done that with a great deal of clarity in the past, and I'm sure he'll do that during the trip as well. And that's been of great reassurance to our allies, partners, and others in the region who are literally under the gun of this regime.
We shouldn't expect any modulation in the language because of where he is.
Well, I don't think the President really modulates his language. Have you noticed him do that? I mean, he's been very clear. He's been very clear about it. And let me just talk about this quickly. I've been aware of the discussions about, hey, is this inflammatory? No, what's inflammatory is the North Korean regime and what they're doing to threaten the world. I think there would be a grave danger if that regime didn't understand our resolve, the president's resolve, to counter North Korean aggression, and the president's made it very clear. Yes.
On the Putin and the Duterte
Is there a
sanctions?
likelihood during the course of this 12-day trip that additional multilateral sanctions will be announced pertaining to North Korea? And the second question I have has to do with China. In your view, General, are they doing enough to apply pressure on the North Korean government?
So on those questions, what you've seen is a concerted effort to isolate North Korea economically, and that's been combined with a major diplomatic effort that asks all countries to do more. There's tremendous momentum behind that now, and we've seen countries across the Indo-Pacific region, but globally, doing more to expel these really, in effect, North Korean slave laborers who are a big source of income for the regime, to shut